of domestic carbon pricing, ETS systems, carbon taxation, domestic carbon crediting, and also the linkages between these markets and international carbon markets. Tomorrow is really International Carbon Markets Day, and the purpose of this session is to really set the stage for tomorrow's deep dive on international carbon markets, voluntary carbon markets, and how they interact. Everyone here is aware that last year during COP, we didn't see as much progress as we would have wished for, despite good progress with Article 6.2 that the supervisory body has made. And on the VCM side, it's really been a mixed story. I was chatting with Hari earlier today, and he introduced the term of the gardenization of carbon markets. And what this really means is that every month we have a negative story about carbon markets in The Guardian. On the other hand, the ecosystem has really come together over the past couple of years to make progress, mostly starting with end-to-end integrity for VCMs. We have really good progress on ICVCM's carbon CCP labeling, with the vast majority of the activity now undergoing CCP assessment. Good progress with VCMI and its claim code, and we'll hear more about this from Dirk and the other panelists. And before we dive in, just a few thoughts and reflections on what we're seeing from the vantage point, from our vantage point at the World Bank, and what we've been hearing from our client countries, many here with us today. What we're seeing is countries are increasingly exploring ways to tap into carbon markets, both voluntary and compliance. As we heard from Beatrice earlier this morning, there still is a lack of clarity around the decision-making process, whether to keep carbon credits to meet NDCs or to sell them via VCMs or via Article 6, and if so, how many to sell, to whom, pricing strategies. And this is in part because of lack of clarity on NDC framing of activities and targets that are eligible for carbon markets, because of slow progress on Article 6 operationalization, because of integrity issues in VCM. Despite all of this slow progress, what we're also seeing is companies and countries are engaging in these markets. Pilot transactions, Article 6.2, independent standards being recognized by countries and for Article 6 transactions, and also political backing that we're seeing from some countries, most notably the announcement by the US government a couple of years ago. We're also seeing countries, many of you here, also starting to invest in carbon market infrastructure and setting up regulatory frameworks for carbon market strategies and activities. And we're also engaging a lot from our side with the private sector that are also interested in tapping into a pipeline of high integrity carbon credits. Flavia spoke about the carbon markets engagement roadmap that we launched last year, so I won't spend too much time on this, but suffice it to say, we're really trying to find ways to make carbon markets work and to make carbon markets work for the benefit of our client countries. So I'm delighted to welcome our panelists today. Dirk from IETA, Perumal and Klaas are online. We don't see them online. Can we make sure that they're there? We know they're there, we just don't yet see them. Maybe Perumal, Klaas, can you say hello? maybe your videos will pop on screen if you speak. Yes? No? Oh, there we are. I see Klaas. Hi, Klaas. Is Perumal also with us? Klaas, you're on mute.
So, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Welcome. Thank you for staying late. We realize we're keeping you up. Is Perumal online?
Yes, we're both online, Perumal and me.
Okay, fantastic. So Perumal, hi. Thanks again for staying up, and sorry we were delayed. Perumal, I'd like to start with you. So big meetings in Bonn earlier this month. So tell us about the progress that was made, and what are the sticking points that remain?
Thank you. Can you hear me well now?
Yes, perfect.
Okay. I'm trying to share the presentation.
We can see your slides. Maybe you want to use share slide mode?
One second.
And I forgot to mention, we're going to try to be very concise and leave a lot of time for Q&A and try to get you out as soon as possible.
Okay. I think I'm finding quite difficult to put the full screen. Is there a possibility for someone to manage the screen?
It might be difficult, but we can see, we can see the slides. So if you just point your cursor, it should be okay.
Okay. I'm trying one more time and then.
Oh, there we go. Perfect.
Okay. I'm not able to see, but I will try. So thank you. I would go to slide number 3. Possibly, I do not know. Okay, so the slides are there for you to have a look later. So I would directly jump on the key issues that are still pending to be resolved within the Article 6 framework. Within Article 6.2, the main issue is in relation to the authorization. There are two worldviews. One is that whether the types of authorization that's being undertaken within the cooperative approaches, whether the authorization is an unified process or one authorization for the cooperative approach entities and the ITMOs. So there are views that the authorization is limited to only to ITMOs, and there are also views that which is asking for all the three, but whether they have to be provided in a sequential manner or together is something that is being discussed. Then in terms of the format, there's some parties or some countries wanted to have a mandatory form, which is like centrally decided by parties, and the format is done through the parties in the negotiation process. So there will be one single type of an authorization form that applies to everything and for everyone. And the other one is whether it's voluntary or no form at all, and that's where we are. And then the third issue with respect to authorization is the level of information that is required in the authorization. So here, this is also inclusive of 6.4, whether and what information needs to be there. If there is a redundancy in terms of information that has been provided in other reporting requirements, do that need to form as a part within the authorization. The last one, which has a larger business interest, is in relation to the changes to the authorization. Once an authorization has been provided, can it be changed or revoked or not? If it can change, then when and under what circumstances that it can change is something that is being that will be discussed in the upcoming session in Baku. The second sticking issue is in respect to sequencing. So as you know that when there's an authorization that's being undertaken, it creates the trigger of submitting the initial report. And then the technical expert review will be undertaking a centralized review of this initial report of the cooperative approaches. So the issue that is sticking is that in case if an inconsistency is identified, which are material in nature, can the subsequent steps of providing the agreed electronic format, as you may know that the agreed electronic format is the form in which that the quantitative information on the ITMO transactions are reported. So there's two divergent views, one saying that irrespective of the conclusion of the review of the initial report, the annual information can be submitted, meaning that the transactions can go through and they can be reported. And the other worldview is that no, it has to be, it can be independent. The third issue is in relation to the infrastructure. So here, the decisions that have already been taken, both in Glasgow and Katowice, is being interpreted differently. So a set of people feel that the international registry can hold and transfer ITMOs as units, and also pull and view data about those units held and transferred in the underlying registry, or it is only about pulling and viewing without the pulling and viewing of data about units only, and there is no transactional. So to us, primarily the issue on authorization and the registries are the ones that needs to be addressed in Baku. As you may have noticed that when it comes to registry, the Secretariat has already launched the technical tender process, and we are in the final stages of procurement. The procurement has taken into account of both the options of having both the transactional registry as well as a pulling and viewing registry, but depending on what parties might decide in Baku, one of the systems will be released. The last one is on the agreed electronic format, and this is about the are we adopting the agreed electronic format now? Because there were two versions, draft versions that were being discussed by parties in Sharm el-Sheikh. So the mandate says that to road test and then subsequently to adopt it. So we are in the process of adopting. And then in terms of the 6.4, there are two issues. One is in terms of timing, because currently as it stands, you have to provide an authorization for 6.4 either at the time of the registration or at the time of issuance, whereas some parties are asking to have parallels with Article 6.2, that it needs to be extended also to allow until the time of the first transfer. The second issue is that there are two asset categories within the Article 6.4 outcomes. The ones that are authorized are the authorized 6.4 ERs, which will become an ITMO, and things that are not authorized becomes mitigation contribution units, which are MCUs. So there's an issue that people are discussing whether or not that if it is an MCU, will there a need to have an authorization statement by the host party, or by default, in the absence of the authorization by the host party, can it be automatically deemed as an MCU? The second issue is about the conversion, which is an issue which is not being captured in this slide. This is another group which is asking that can the conversion could happen once they are labeled as MCUs before they are first transferred. Can these units be then called as authorized units if the necessary authorization are provided? The mechanism registry, it's again, can the A64 ERs from the mechanism registry can be transferred and held in the international registry, or it's only the pulling and viewing, which is similar. And then the second issue is related to the connections between the participating party registry and to the mechanism registry. Can the participating party registry directly connect to and receive the authorized A64 ERs from the mechanism registry? So these are the only two issues that are from the Substa side on Article 6.4. And among many, if you see in this previous slide, these are the four kind of showstoppers, and among which I would say both authorization and the registries, which are pretty much similar with some modifications towards Article 6.4. So ideally, the two issues that will be taking much of the time in the Baku COP from the Substa process is on the authorization and the registry. But you also might have heard about one of the reasons for not having an outcome in Dubai is not necessarily what was discussed in the room, because in the SAFSTA process itself, but it is more about the recommendations that came from the supervisory body, which is overseeing Article 6.4 implementation. And that constituted body has made some recommendations around the methodological principles and removals. So on 6.4, in addition to these two issues, the most critical issue would be the recommendation that the supervisory body is undertaking on the MET and the removal, which we would be considering in Baku. There was also yet another reason. It's unfortunate that for me not to be there, because currently the MET expert group is currently meeting on developing the tools and guidances around both the removals and MET guidance. So which made it difficult for me to travel. Otherwise, I would have loved to be there. But it's not all. Like, actually, there was some kind of an progress that happened in Bonn, which is very positive, meaning that, as you know, that after Dubai, the SAFTA chair had spent quite an amount of time in between the sessions, because he did not have a mandate to produce anything. But in order to advance the process, he did reach out to some groups and some parties during the intersessional period and requested the support for countries that he could not able to interact in the interim period through a text that he has prepared, and that was used for information as a basis, and then the parties were able to turn the text on the third day by adding elements that they would like to see in the text. So at least going into Baku, we have a draft text, of course with options and brackets, but at least that is now fully owned by parties, so we will not have a process issue when we enter Baku. The second issue is that quite a number of things that the parties have decided that the Secretariat should start implementing them and update the status on CMA, meaning that they have removed from their plates on certain items that they were currently negotiating. Those are related to common nomenclatures, the confidentiality provisions related to the technical expert review, and also the code of conduct for the Article 6 technical expert reviewers. So the Secretariat, like I would go in the next slide on what the Secretariat is planning to implement on these things. But these three things have been removed from the topics to be discussed in Baku. Then also that there is a general agreement on forwarding discussions on certain issues to the future session. So under Article 6.4, it is in relation to the national arrangements, which was moved to 2028, because you might be wondering why 2028 has been chosen. And I know that some of the negotiators are in the room, whom I'm chatting with. So this 2028 is primarily the time period in which the RMP and the guidance are up for review by parties to look into, based on the experience that will be gained since Glasgow until 2028. So the countries have agreed to move the national arrangements and avoidance to 2028. And then there was a clear, explicit recommendation that has been provided under 6.4 to say that emission avoidance is not included in the current RMPs. The same within Article 6.2 as well, the concept of avoidance has been moved to 2028. So this is a quick snapshot on the work that will be done. So I'm not going to say what we have done. These slides are available. But what we are going to do from now until the time that we enter the COP, the first and foremost is the Article 6 manual. We do have a draft, the first version of the manual available since Dubai. So there will be a revised Article 6 manual, which will incorporate all the reporting requirements. It's expected to be published by end of next week. The review training material for the reviewers will also be done by 8th of July. That's a plan. And by 22nd of July, we will have the training for the technical expert reviewers who will be undertaking the technical expert review. between the week of 22nd to the 26th. As you know, that we have so far received 6 initial reports submitted by countries as part of the Article 6.2 cooperation. So they will be taken up for the centralized review sometime in the month of October, early October, a centralized review. And then there will be an RSA forum meeting, which will be working on the business rules and the communication protocols and the data exchange standards outlined for interoperability between different registry systems with that of the international registry. So this RSA forum will be virtual. That will also happen early September. So really, like, while we are working and waiting for certain things to be decided at the COP and in the political negotiations level, you could very well see that the implementation is in full force, including in my earlier intervention, I said about the infrastructure development where we are in the final stages of the procurement. 6.4, I already mentioned about the work that is being undertaken. The SASTA we have looked at, and within the supervisory body as well, the work is going on with respect to the removals and methodological guidance. The one which was highlighted in a different color at the bottom, despite the not having a positive or a negative outcome, but not having a decision in Dubai, the supervisory body has already started working on the implementation. They are working on about 12 tools and guidances that will facilitate the finalization of the removal and the methodological guidance that will come to the COP for consideration. In terms of the outstanding issues on the PACM, which is the Paris Agreement Crediting Mechanism, now it has a new name from Article 6.4 mechanism. Our take of sense is that it's not just a failure of the Article 6.4, but in general, it's a wake-up call for all of us who are in the carbon markets to look at particularly removal types of activities where the countries have a complete different understanding and complete different expectations when those types of activities are exposed to carbon markets. And then within the 6.4 delivery, I stole one of the slides later, which you would see, which I think the World Bank is also working, or they already done for the outcomes from Article 6.4 or the work related to 6.4. But the important thing is that the interim mechanism registry would be in place for issuing Article 6.4 units by 1st of October 2024. We so far have received close to about 75 countries as nominated their designated national authorities, and 3 countries have already submitted their fulfillment of host party responsibilities, and also 1 country has submitted a letter of approval for 2 transitioning activities. And then in addition to new activities, there are about 1,500 plus CDM activities have submitted the transition request. They have gone through the first step of the global stakeholder consultation process. As and when the countries will provide the necessary authorization, because among this 1,500 plus CDM activities, close to 70% can actually use the existing CDM methodology until 2025 based on the Glasgow decision. So we, as a Secretariat for Internal Planning, we are also anticipating there could be some projects that might become, the transitioning projects might become an Article 6.4 activity before the end of this year. And there's also a high possibility that an issuance might also potentially happen this year for the transitioning activity. And then the SBM in terms of the COP28, that's what the supervisory body has been developing. As indicated earlier, that we are expecting about 12 to 13 standards or guidelines that might provide the necessary information for parties to decide. So for 6.4 mechanism, I would say that if all goes well, we may have the first 6.4 activity registered and issued from a transitioning activity before we go to Baku. And immediately after Baku, we also expect that if these MET and the removal guidance are adopted, a new methodological submissions might come forward. Then the last slide, and that's what I said, that I think I also have to thank friends from the World Bank. There are many things that I have added more, but the basic structure follows. So this basically elucidates the fact of the work that is being undertaken by the supervisory body over the year of 2023 and what they are doing in 2024 on various aspects related to activity cycle infrastructure. In terms of activity cycle, we do have an approved activity standard for project activities. The POAs are expected to be approved in next meeting in July from the 11th to the 15th. Infrastructure, I indicated that we would have the interim registry available from 1st of October. The internal workflows and the digital web interfaces are already being established. While we are speaking for accreditation under Article 6.4, 3 independent entities have submitted their application to get accredited under the Article 6.4 accreditation. And we also have received 30 requests of intent to be accredited from the existing CDM DOEs to become Article 6.4. In terms of methodological provisions, the supervisory body would be finalizing the recommendations, and the MET expert group that's meeting this week will also advancing its work on the various products. From the project submission, the activity transition, as I said, can potentially happen before the end of the year. And then in the early part of the last meeting in April, late April, early May, already the supervisory body has completed the appeals and grievance processes.